Okay, hey everybody, welcome to Sunday of week 3. We are going through Culturama and we've had all sorts of great stuff. Now we're going to have some more great stuff today. We're going to have Scott Creley is talking about Ekphrasis. Later on today, let's see, we have conceptualized crafting and pitching the long essay with Ishan Lai. We have Robert Peluso creating comics from scratch and to sketch and beyond. And we're keeping Culturama going for the rest of the year. And if you'd like to join, please join our Culturama blog site, the Culturama community. We're putting up all our recordings here. And in the future, when we have information, we're going to put that up there. Make sure you follow over here. You can follow just by email, or you can follow by becoming a follower. Okay, but right now, what we have is Scott Noon Creley. Scott Noon Creley is a fantastic poet. He's been published all over this place. He's got a book called Digging a Hole to the Moon, which is an exceptionally good book. And he's a Mount Sac alum. He is back teaching. I'm so proud to see him here and doing all that he's doing. So, Scott Creley.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for being here. As John said, today we're going to discuss ekphrastic poetry, which is all about using the art of other people to generate your own writing. It's when we describe it in a very linear fashion, it's a literary description of a piece of artwork. But really, what it is work that responds to a piece of art that the writer is interacting with. So it's really art interacting with art, which means that you as a writer are getting a chance to utilize somebody else's creativity to in turn engender your own creativity. And that means that depending on the piece of art you pick and how imaginative you can be taken in directions that you would never expect. So we're going to utilize pieces of art, and we're also going to utilize, as I'd like to do in my workshops this year and periodically in my classes, is to utilize randomness so that we are taken even more out of our comfort zones, but also exposed to ideas that we otherwise might not think of ourselves. If you look over in the chat, I have dropped a link to the handout that I will be using today that has some resources to our paintings that we'll be utilizing, some examples that I've given you, and it has a prompt on it as well. But what I'll do now is I will share my screen and put the handout right here in front of us, and hopefully, can everybody still see both myself and the handout? Yes. Drew? All right, great. If you want to find me later, here's how you can do it up at the top there. First off, I'd love to hear how your work went, what you're working on, and all of those things. Here's everything else we'll be working on today. So if you want to track down anything we discussed today and look at it later, it's all here in this handout. So ekphrastic poetry provides us with a bunch of opportunities based on the artwork that we're looking at, and it allows us to write in a few modes. First of all, when we look at a piece of art, it's giving us something that is already completed, has already been worked on. It provides you with material that's rich, has a bunch of depth, has a bunch of detail, and has a bunch of subtext and connections working right in front of you. And you as a writer, engaging with a piece of artwork, can unearth those things and in turn link up with those existing connections in depth and detail, which also gives you the opportunity to write from a different space than where you currently are, to write in a different time if the artwork is created in an era other than our own, which, all artwork is. It's inherently temporal, but at the same time atemporal, and potentially to look into another culture as well. And that gives us a few modes that we can address that in. We can, some authors create a portrait of the artist. One of the examples that I'll give you talks about like the composition process of a painting and what the person who painted it is like, and possibly what their mindset was. And it essentially lets us engage with and imagine an author. Another mode that people write in sometimes when they write ekphrastic poetry, they don't just describe the painting necessarily, they describe the audience response to that painting. Either how they imagine other people responding to it, or what it's trying to say to other people, or what it is saying to them as an audience member. Doing a piece like this also lets you crystallize your thoughts and reactions to a piece. Like I for instance, I and many others have a strong reaction when I look at Van Gogh's Starry Night, and it's something that I and many other authors, one of our examples here too, have wanted to crystallize. It's actually one of the first poems I ever got published was an Ekphrasis piece about Starry Night. So it gives us the opportunity to literalize our viewpoint and turn it into a piece of art. And ultimately, what we're seeking to do is expand the meaning of the painting and invest new meaning into it and new interpretation, while at the same time expanding our writing. When we do this properly, we have two pieces of art essentially feeding off of each other. And to me, it's a really wonderful, cool thing. So is everybody able to access the, let me check the chat here. Is everybody able to access the handout all right on their own? Okay, great, because you'll be able to, I want to make sure it's shared properly, because you'll want to click around on this once you get into the actual exercise portion. So we're going to look at some examples of what this is like when some authors have done it. And then we'll follow that by you guys creating, first we'll talk about some of the elements you can talk about when you write this sort of art. And then we'll follow up with you guys writing, of course, some exercises yourself, and ideally sharing them, or at least, portions of them or fragments that you come up with. So I'd like to start off with an example on Starry Night by Anne Sexton. And what I think I'll do is I'll share the image so we can look at it as we hear the poem. And then I will read the poem to you guys because it's a pretty brilliant, tight little piece. The Starry Night. And this is on the handout if you want to find it later. The Starry Night. And it starts with an epigraph from Van Gogh. That does not keep me from having a terrible need of, shall I say the word, religion. Then I go out at night to paint the stars. Vincent van Gogh in a letter to his brother. Wait, where are my chopsticks? Oh, go ahead and mute if you have anything going on. Okay. The town does not exist, except where one black-haired tree slips up like a drowned woman into the hot sky. The town is silent. The night boils with 11 stars. Oh, starry night, this is how I want to die. It moves. They are all alive. Even the moon bulges in its orange irons to push children like a god from its eye. The old unseen serpent swallows up the stars. Oh, starry night, this is how I want to die. Into that rushing beast of the night, sucked up by that great dragon, to split from my life with no flag, no belly, no cry. So she's taken this poem and she's analyzed the motion of it, the color palettes, the use of space in this great swirl that comes across the side. She's even just observed the framing and subject, the 11 stars that are on the page. And she's taken all those visual critical elements and made also her response to the piece. And so she starts with description and moves to an evaluation of these elements. And then finally we have the final phase where she's giving her analysis, her interpretation. And we start from almost an art criticism perspective and then move to creativity there. And she talks about this really visceral reaction. She moves from viewing this thing and seeing all the elements to thinking, this is how I want to die, which is an awesome reaction to this poem, to this painting, and then asks herself, well, how did I reach there? And so she begins by describing it and then starts making these intuitive leaps around the painting. And it's quite a good ekphrastic response to it. Let me read you another one by Edward Hopper. And here's the painting. And this one, if you pull up the poem yourself later, you may need to zoom in on it. And this is Edward Hopper and is painting the house by the railroad. And Ed Hirsch is the one writing this ekphrastic piece in response to it. Out here in the exact middle of the day, this strange, gawky house has the expression of someone being stared at, someone holding his breath underwater, hushed and expectant. This house is ashamed of itself, ashamed of its fantastic mansard rooftop and its pseudo-Gothic porch, ashamed of its shoulders and large, awkward hands. But the man behind the easel is relentless. He is as brutal as sunlight and believes the house must have done something horrible to the people who once lived here. Because now it is so desperately empty. It must have done something to the sky, because the sky, too, is utterly vacant and devoid of meaning. There are no trees or shrubs anywhere. The house must have done something against the earth. All that is present is a single pair of tracks straightening into the distance. No trains pass. Now the stranger returns to this place daily, until the house begins to suspect that the man, too, is desolate, and somehow ashamed. Soon, the house starts to stare frankly at the man, and somehow the empty white canvas slowly takes on the expression of someone who is unnerved, someone holding his breath underwater. And then, one day, the man simply disappears. He is the last afternoon shadow moving across the tracks, making its way through the vast, darkening fields. This man will paint other abandoned mansions, and faded cafeteria windows, and poorly lettered storefronts on the edges of small towns. Always, they will have the same expression, the utterly naked look of someone being stared at, someone American and gawky, someone who is about to be left alone again and can no longer stand it. So this one's great because it takes not only the visual elements on the page, the space, the motion, the way the eye is drawn to the house, also the forlorn color palette, this empty space, the almost whiteness of the sky, these train track elements in the foreground. And it starts with all these visual elements, and then it personifies them. He says the house is ominous and awkward and gawky. And then, because Hirsch is aware of Hopper's, but there's actually another Hopper painting in the paintings you might end up with, aware of Hopper's career, his artistic catalog, he interprets both the moods of the artist. He says that the artist is lonely, that the artist is merciless, that the artist identifies with the house, but also that all of his other paintings are like this. You guys are probably familiar with the painting Nighthawk that has a bunch of people sitting in an empty diner, and none of them are looking at the viewpoint of the painter, and all the colors are sort of muted, and everybody in the painting looks lonely, including the imaginary eye of the artist. And that's captured here in this painting. And Hirsch, being aware of that, includes that in his painting as well. So sometimes you can have a visceral reaction like Anne Sexton did and just look at the visual elements and interpret them. If you know anything about the artist, or even imagine anything about the artist, because a lot of this is supposition, that can work into your interpretation of what you're looking at too. And for my third example, you actually do not have to have this doesn't have to just be paintings. It can be pieces of sculpture. It can be photography. One of my other pieces that I've written that gets reprinted a lot is based on Chinese propaganda photography by Li Zhenxing, and it is my interpretation of each of the images and my reaction to them as an American who's trying to imagine Mao's China. So sometimes and also my knowledge of the fact that the photographer is eventually put into a work camp, because as much as he tried to take favorable propaganda posters for Mao, his paintings always, his pictures always showed a little bit of judgment, always showed a little bit of reticence, and he couldn't help making the subjects a little bit scary. And eventually it got him imprisoned. And one of his last photos in his most famous book is a picture of him in a work camp, a self-portrait on a camera that he smuggled in. And so that plays into the poems that I wrote about him as well. So you can bring in a lot of knowledge, but you also don't even have to have knowledge. It can be your reaction. And it's all about marrying yourself and the visual elements that are on the page, and perhaps your larger knowledge or feelings about art in general, and you can come up with a piece of work that's fairly unique to you. And a really great example of this is Ocean Vuong's Ocean Vuong's piece on the evacuation of Vietnam, which is something that people are primarily familiar with through photojournalism. And Vuong has a piece called "Abode with Burning City" that focuses on the evacuation of Vietnam, and also brings in a secondary element here that is based around the song that was used to initiate the evacuation of Vietnam at the end of the Vietnam War, when South Vietnam fell and the Americans left from it. The song that was used to kick off the secret symbol that would tell the Americans to evacuate and take the people they were evacuating with them was the song "I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas." And so Vuong takes these images, these very famous images, and I can't show them all because there's a number of them, but takes these very famous images, marries them to the song, and then also talks about the images they imagine based on these photos. So I'll read that poem to you as well. And unfortunately, it closed out my window that has this in it. All right, I have to go through JSTOR to get this poem. By the way, you can get a free JSTOR account that'll let you view 100 articles a month during the pandemic. So normally this is locked off behind institutions, but it's a very comprehensive set of aggregator of research and literary journals. So all of us are obviously readers because we're writers. I definitely recommend doing this. So even if you're not part of an institution or anything similar, you can now get in there. Okay. And it's logged me out too. Thanks, JSTOR. It's got some technical problems because it is ultimately an academic institution tool. But once you get past that, it's quite good. So. And I'm doing it because this poem is great. It's worth seeing. Oh. Okay, Abode with Burning City. South Vietnam, April 29th, 1975. Armed Forces Radio played Irving Berlin's White Christmas as a code to begin Operation Frequent Wind, the ultimate evacuation of American civilians and Vietnamese refugees by helicopter during the fall of Saigon. Milk flower petals on the street, like pieces of a girl's dress. May your days be merry and bright. He fills a teacup with champagne, brings it to her lips. Open, he says. She opens. Outside, a soldier spits out his cigarette as footsteps fill the square like stones fallen from the sky. May all your Christmases be white, as the traffic guard unstraps his holster, his hand running the hem of her white dress, his black eyes, her black hair, a single candle, their shadows, 2 wicks. A military truck speeds through the intersection, the sound of children shrieking inside, a bicycle hurled through a store window. When the dust rises, a black dog lies in the road, panting, its hind legs crushed into the shine of a white Christmas. On the nightstand, a sprig of magnolia expands like a secret, heard for the first time. Go. Somebody has some music on in the. Oh, maybe that's the site. It sounds like White Christmas. The treetops glisten and children listen. The chief of police face down in a pool of Coca-Cola, a palm-sized photo of his father soaking beside his left ear. The song moving through the city like a widow. A white, white, I'm dreaming of a curtain of snow falling from her shoulders, snow crackling against the window, snow shredded with gunfire, red sky, snow on the tanks rolling over the city walls, a helicopter lifting the living just out of reach, the city so white it is ready for ink, the radio saying run, 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 milk flower petals on a black dog, like pieces of a girl's dress. May your days be merry and bright, she's saying, something neither of them can hear. The hotel rocks beneath them. The bed, a field of ice cracking. Don't worry, he says, as the first bomb brightens their faces. My brothers have won the war, and tomorrow the lights go out. I'm dreaming to hear sleigh bells in the snow. In the square below, a nun on fire runs silently toward her god. Open, he says. She opens. So here, and this is a great poem. Vong takes both the ekphrastic element of the song and these photojournalist photos of Vietnam being evacuated, and their visual elements, the images that are on the page, mainly the subjects, not so much things like space and line and shape, but rather the subjects themselves and the composition, and makes them into a piece that's unique to them as an author, because these are the things they imagine, and these are sort of the horrified sequence of events they see as Saigon falls. So it's quite a powerful piece, I think. And let me go ahead and check the chat, because I see people are chatting at me. Oh yeah, they did indeed open access House from the movie Giant. I concur. Yeah, and Kelsey, I agree. It's an amazing poem. There's a reason Long is so prominent right now as a poet and a novelist. I highly recommend their books. So let's actually, I guess I'll continue with my handout here. So I think one of the having looked at those poems. And sort of looked briefly, very briefly, at the process they use to reach their ends, you can sort of see in various ways steps that you can follow when you're writing an ekphrastic piece. And to break it down in a very basic way, you can essentially break it down in the way that art criticism breaks these things down. Primarily, our idea, the very basic process that you can follow here is to describe the piece, to analyze it, and then to critique, and not necessarily critique in terms of evaluate, but rather even give a personal response. So if you're very lost, you can follow sort of this general pattern, which is what all of our authors in one way or another are doing. But when somebody does Ekphrasis, they're really looking at the elements that somebody looks at when they're performing art criticism, which means subject, what's inside of the piece. All of our authors that we just read, in one way or another, start with subject, what is actually there in the piece. A starry night, a house that sticks out like a sore thumb, a series of photos of the evacuation of Saigon, as well as song lyrics. They're all approaching subject first. Then they look at composition. What visual elements are included in the artwork and why? And we especially see this in like the 11 Stars, Van Sexton's poem, or the house and its various architectural elements, which is what we start with in the Hirsch poem. And so then often authors will look at motion, how the art elements create the illusion of motion, what draws your eye, how you progress in your attention to the painting. Like many people notice within Motion of a Starry Night that there's that great swirl of air that moves through the middle of it, and that sort of draws your attention to the twisted tree in the foreground, all of the stars that are in the sky, and then sort of finally the village. There's a visual path you follow when you look at a piece of art, and that's something that you as a writer who's doing an ekphrastic poem can look at as well. What am I following and why? Obviously, color, the hue of it, the value, the intensity, what scheme they use. The Hirsch poem, the Hirsch poem notices the very desolate coloration of those paintings, of the painting that he's analyzing of the house. But Sexton also notices the really vibrant, sort of almost divine color scheme of Starry Night. Balance, how does it occupy its area? There's a big void at the top of our Hooper painting, our house painting. What symbols and icons are in it? How does it use the line? Does it have lines? Is there a definition to them, a presence? Space, the area between objects in a work, and finally shape, like what shapes does it use that we can recognize and identify? And these are gradually getting smaller and more discrete, each element, but they're all things we can look at. Now, none of these are things that you have to look at. The rules that make something an ekphrastic piece essentially are making sure that we've identified the artwork, that we examine the other artwork in some fashion, but otherwise that's really the only thing that bounds us. If we don't deal with the artwork at all, it's not an ekphrastic poem anymore, right? So we do have to sort of identify and deal with that artwork, but other than that, we can as we discussed before, go into talking about our reaction to it, the author's reaction to it, the audience's reaction to it, some sort of a relationship it has with the world, or even the way it marries to the world in our mind in a way that we wouldn't expect. Let me examine the chat here for a second. Yes, Ocean's Belongings books definitely deal with very intense subjects, as a lot of great books do. But it's worth knowing before you get into it. I think even reading the synopsis on most of their books will cue you into that fact. So today I want you guys to attempt writing some of your own ekphrastic poetry, because we're going to try and do a generative workshop. I think one of the great things about Culturama is it gives you a chance to create some art and pitch that art to a bunch of other like-minded writers. And so we'll do at least a couple rounds of that today. What are we, 11:30? Yeah, we'll have time to do at least a couple rounds of that today. To mix things up, I like to use a random number generator sometimes with a series of prompts. And actually I'll drop the link to that into our handout as well. So I start with a random number generator. And I have a series of prompts set up to help us get random to get new work out of sort of a process of randomization. And so there's a series of prompts that can and a series of artwork here inside of this piece that we can use to do that. And we're not going to start with one of our prompts. What I want us to try first, just as a means of warming up, is to not necessarily draw these big connections like we did, like the authors above. That's a big jump, and we don't have to do that right away. What I would like us to do is to, and here's the link for the random number generator, which I use in my other workshops. What I'd like us to do is just start by attempting to do and it doesn't have to be a unified piece, to do a description of one of these pieces of artwork that's ended up on our list. We can start by going to the random number generator and setting it to generate between 1 and 15 and have it roll up one of these paintings for us. So what I'd like us to do is start simply by describing the sheet, the piece. And you can look at the artistic terms that we have on our sheet as a start, but also you can look at it the way that our authors did and look at what images are generated via the 5 senses. What do we think this painting would sound like? What do we think we would smell if we were there? What do we think it would feel like if we could touch the texture of the objects inside of it? Or maybe the painting itself, like what memories does it, start by describing it via your 5 senses: taste, sight, touch, sound, smell. Was that all of them? Did I get all the 5? I'm assuming. John, did I get them all? All right, great. First start there. Start by describing the piece, and then maybe any images it brings to your 5 senses. And then after that, describe associations it brings up. What does it make you think and feel? What memories does it bring forth? What are your first thoughts when you look at it? And this isn't our poem, but this is priming our brains to write a poem. We're going to have some more complex prompts that I'm going to ask you to do once we try this exercise. But let's, for now, take... Maybe we'll take 10 minutes. Yeah, let's take 10 and first start by pulling up this random number generator, setting it to roll between 1 and 13, and then based on whatever number you pull up one of these pieces that I have here, and just start by describing 1, the artistic elements, the subject, and then 2, what sense images we get from it, and possibly 3, what reactions do we have to it. And you're not trying to do a poem or a piece of flash fiction right now. You're just trying to get ideas flowing, to catalog your reactions to it. Let's see this. Yeah, the handout is there. Okay, yeah, great. Okay. Let's take 10 minutes. It is now 34. Let's say that we'll reconvene at 45. I'll check in with you guys, give you a minute, a couple warnings a minute. Chat at me if you have any questions. Otherwise, actually, if you'd like to, feel free to turn your camera off and then turn it back on when you're done, and then I'll know we're ready to go. Otherwise, also feel free to leave it on. You know, it's all you. But I'll check back in with you soon. We'll take about 10 minutes to try that. just a couple more minutes. And remember, you don't have to create a finished product. You don't have any desired form or result. This just has to be notes and impressions on whatever piece you ended up with. All right, go ahead and finish up wherever you're at. Take the opportunity to finish your sentence or your image or your impression. And I'd like to just look at the images and see what a few of our collected impressions are. And you can go ahead and flick on your camera if you're able to. If you don't have your camera up, you can go ahead and use those reactions down at the bottom. If you'd like to share your pieces, you can give me a thumbs up or really any other symbol, and I'll know to call on you. We'll reserve the clapping for everybody's good work, but so if you're on voice only, you can use that mode. This hopefully is started to get you into the mode of writing about a piece of art in front of you to give you new ideas. I can start by just talking about my collected impressions of one of my pieces, and then let's see what you guys came up with. So I ended up pulling one of the stranger pieces on here, in my opinion. Well, actually, they're all fairly strange. I picked a bunch of weird paintings for you guys to see what you come up with. But I ended up rolling, where are we? The Bobot 2018. I do not know what a Bobot is, but I accept the Bobot. So this is a digital painting. Actually, this artist has an Instagram that's called Beatbowl Crap, and you can follow them if you like this piece. I don't know why they denigrate themselves like that, but they're a fairly prominent digital painter, and they do these sort of very fantastical images. But I pulled up this one, and so I started by listing my impressions. And so, subject-wise, the first things I noticed were the uncountable buildings that are crowding the frame. Right, I noticed that the sky is small and it's crowded and it's light polluted, and I then notice that there are silhouettes scattered like dust across the bottom of the frame. So it sort of gave me a simile. I'd say the sky is bruised and purple by that light pollution. I imagine that you would have the smell of ionized air from the technology, the billboards, the lights, if you were in here. I thought that the buildings here sort of look like gaudy bishops that have been defaced with interfaces, like chess pieces, probably because I've been watching too much Queen's Gambit on Netflix, but that's fine. In a following image, I feel like they're looming. They're very forward in the frame and they're huge. And so I said it's a looming checkmate, the final moves of a chess match, these buildings that are all forward in the frame. So it's really my perspective crowding in on the painting at this point. That there are massive neon ideograms, like a challenge. There's something about the way these are projecting to me that seem like a sort of like defiant shout to the darkness that's around them. I noticed in its very basic observation the wild, bright primary colors of the ideas that are on each of these screens. I noticed that the ground is slick with an invisible rain that never seems to stop falling. It looks wet to me, and I imagine this place is always wet because of how it is. So it's really just a list of impressions to get me in the mood and the mode of writing. And some of it's just observations. I noticed that your eyes are drawn first to the writing all over the buildings, and then the form of the building itself, and then the sky. And then I would say the last thing I notice are the many, many, many people crowding the foreground. So if I wrote about this, that might be the path I followed in my observations of it. And I noticed that my personal reaction to this painting is a mix of a sort of positivity and admiration, but I also find it to be ominous at the same time. I have serious mixed emotions from looking at it. It looks like serious advancement, and like a great thing has been achieved with this image, these people in the image, but at the same time, almost as if it's overwhelming their humanity. There's so many interfaces, and the people are so small, and they're so indistinct. And that's probably the mode I would take when I ended up writing a poem about it, if I ended up writing a poem about it. And so I've sort of discovered these themes and my feelings about it, and expanded this work and my writing just by looking at it and observing it and sort of noticing the way that I react to it. And so I potentially have a poem out of that. And although I don't have a poem now, I just have a collection of impressions. I believe that I have places and images and impressions to go with, as well as ideas for sort of the overarching theme of that poem. Oh yeah, yeah. You had this one too. Yeah, it does look like a photo, doesn't it? It's the digital paintings can kind of be confusing like that. I would not be surprised if it's an overpaint of a photo with maybe some science fiction elements added in. The buildings are pretty strange. If there is a place with buildings like that, I want to visit it. It's pretty cool. So did anybody else? Well, Kelsey, would you mind sharing your impressions of this? And you don't have to. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I would love, since you have the exact same one, and let me project that again, to see what you pulled out it. And I bet you it's there's some overlaps, but I bet you have some fairly different things too.
Yeah, let me see in my notes where I started. I ran out of journals, so now I'm just like using random paper.
Yeah, that's my game too. I fill up these little novelty things rapidly.
So yeah, I kind of didn't really do bullet points, but it was like a stream of conscious.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, the architecture more like sculpture here. The lines of perspective playing games with themselves in my dreams. The buildings, fireworks blasting the sky in bright mystic colors spouting of the sound of words. The people gather like moths to glowworms. An internal animalism calling the illogic of us, bumping into each other like in the old days. In my dreams, I can speak French, but Japanese still surpasses me. Among the lights, I see the small word sushi. No, this is the door for me, the outer building, the peripheral site. It was this island, but a smaller town where my mother found out she was pregnant with me. Craved ice cubes and udon noodles. I look up and notice how bright this place is, how it blinds the stars from the sky. And wonder, did the architects feel lonely when they stepped back and saw the lights? And if they could blow it out like a birthday candle, what is it they would really wish? I close my eyes and imagine a good night's sleep, a new or different dream.
Ah, man, that's excellent. So obviously you're a good way towards first off, let me give you a screen clap because it's very solid. Yeah, you got a lot done, and you took it in some really unexpected directions. And you start with the visual elements. You sort of also, like many of our poets, trace your eye around the frame, and then you link all those visual elements and some art criticism elements too back to your own experience, and you start digging into your past, your mother's past, the place, and the sort of like orienting culture of the image. And you got a lot there already. That's fantastic. And nobody be intimidated. By the way, Kelsey's a really experienced writer, so you don't have to like pull up something out of there immediately. But yeah, that was fantastic. Really good work.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. Did anybody else? Would you like to share like your collection of impressions from one of the images? I won't call on anybody, but God, it's my deep temptation with my all week of teaching to pop in on somebody. Matt, I saw you unmute. Do you want to? Yeah, thank you, man. Which piece did you get? I'll put it up on the screen.
I got the Don Quixote one.
Oh, sweet. I
Yeah.
love that one.
Yeah, so like I don't know if I did this right because I always just kind of end up doing what I end up no matter what someone tells me to do. I always end up doing the same thing. All right, guys, this is what I have: the dust, the road, the rocks, the path, the horse, the will, the others, the order, the steel, the hours, the steps, the horses of other men, the steel of other men, the will of other men, the burden of a shared world, the burden of an orderly path.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, you start with all the visual elements. You start with the dust and the rock and the wind, and like I think that all that is there, especially as motion, like with the cross hashing across it, and then you depart to really like talking about fate and the burdens we place on ourselves when we give ourselves a mission. Don Quixote, and what it takes to approach a mission like that. So you also have a real real complete take right away, but Matt's a really experienced writer, so also nobody be intimidated by that. But hey, just his new book, Mowing Leaves of Grass, available. What's the press again?
Flower Song.
Yeah, Flower Song Press. Good cover too. So you want more of that, pop into that book. But yeah, it's you're doing exactly what we want to do with this method of writing is starting visual, like exploring the piece, and then launching into like both the context of the piece, which you do with Quixote, and Dali too, like with his surrealism, and then attached to ourselves, because it's art meeting art. So we want to bring our ideas into the piece and expand both of them, take our brain in a direction we otherwise wouldn't be going in, and that's our mission. Let's see. So I'd like to do more, but I also want you guys to get a chance to try out one of the prompts at least before we take off and share some results from that. So that's always how I start off when I'm going to do an art-inspired poem. Is I start by just listing impressions from it and seeing where ideas take me and what connections I make. And then if I really want an additional challenge, I'll give myself some restrictions, which is really like what this set of prompts is all about. So use the random number generator again. What we'll do is we'll use a random number generator again. And we have a list of 7 possible prompts. So you can end up with one of these, and then the prompt will ask you to roll up a number of pieces of art, again from the art list back up here. Some prompts will ask you to roll up 2 and kind of draw a connection between it, and others will just be working on mostly 1. And we have a few different prompts here. I'll just read a couple as examples. You stepped into the piece of art. You exist in its universe. What happens? What do you do? What does it look like in there? How do you interact with the subject? Try to comment on the media, composition, artist, etc. So you run with you have stepped in there, basically, like you are existing within it, which to some extent is happened with both Matt and Kelsey's, even though it hasn't been framed yet as a full poem. Second prompt, you are interacting with the artist in some fashion, an argument, a date, you're kissing, you're fist fighting in the streets, you're in a debate, a courtroom, you're getting married. Use the piece as a focal point for this interaction. It's the only bridge you have between you. So I'm asking you to, like some of the pieces that we read as examples in the first part, to comment on the artist, particularly the Ed Hirsch poem that comments on opera. So and I'll let you see what the other ones are like when you roll up. But one is like the piece is a tarot card. The other one is like a piece is your memory, et cetera, et cetera. They're all different, and they're all making different demands to you. If you roll one up and you hate it, just roll another one. It's fine. If you roll one up and it takes you in a totally different direction, well, that's the damn point. Like, to generate writing for you, so go in the different direction. Like prompts are only as valuable as what you get from them. So they're only there to be the structure for your rocket. It falls away once the rocket goes off. So never let the rules of it restrict you, but also sometimes restrictions can give you new challenges and take you new directions. So hence the random element, and hence perhaps the prompt. So let's say this is asking a little more of you. So let's take 15 minutes for this. Roll up a prompt and then roll up the appropriate number of paintings with that random number generator, which is right up here. And if you find that you like the piece that you already wrote a catalog of images and impressions and ideas for, run with that one and write a poem out of that based on the prompt or based on the ideas you got from our first nudge at this exercise. The point is just to generate work. So let's take 15, and I'll warn you when you got a few minutes left, and then we'll see what we come up with work-wise while we do this. So you can feel free to turn off your camera or leave it on or whatever. I'll turn mine back on when it's time, so you know. And I'll be answering chats and the questions. So chat at me or to the group, and I'm here to answer them.
Could you show those 7 prompts again? Thanks.
Marta, I may have been muted when I was talking to you. I dropped the link to the prompts again in the
Yeah.
chat.
I got it. Thanks.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
About 1 more minute left. All right, go ahead and finish up wherever you are and trickle back in. And I know it's a big ask, but if anybody would like to share what they came up with, it'd be awesome to hear what we came up with. And it doesn't have to be anything finalized. It doesn't have to be finished. Hopefully, it's just the start of something. It can even be a set of images. But if you want to bounce it off the group of writers here, perhaps we can give you some advice on where to go next, what's really working for you, what maybe could be expanded or dropped, or really anything. So, anybody want to bravely volunteer? Be our first. Let's see. Should I? Oh yes, Shema, please. Which one did you get? I'll pull it up on screen while you read.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Which one did you pull up?
I got Saturn eating his child.
Oh, nice and dark. Yeah, I picked a lot of just grim or weird paintings because I wanted to see what you guys came up with. Where are you, Saturn?
11.
Ah, thank
10.
you.
10.
All right, thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
I smell the blood before I see it. The wild eyes as you crunch and gag. I am not the fickle goddess they take me for. I am silent, dissatisfied, the only thing holding this family together. How we learn to strip our fathers down for spare parts. Why do you spit yourself out until he fits in your father's image? All
Nets, I think it cut you out there, unless it's just me. Shema, can you hear me?
you begin to retch between your sobs while I wrap the bowl in linen. I sniff while your form bows and shivers, rubs itself back to life, my eyes on the ceiling.
Hey Shema, you dropped out after spare parts. Do you want to back up and take it from there? Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Why do you spit yourself out until he fits in your father's image? All I hear when you speak is the coming and going of waves, the endless push of Sisyphus. I sweep the form from your hands and lay it prone in a bowl. I slap the back of your head, and his, convex but whole, rolls from your throat. You begin to retch between your sobs while I wrap the bowl in linen. I sniff while your form bows and shivers, rubs itself back to life, my eyes on the ceiling. I will find Circe and see what can be done.
That's fantastic. I'm screen clapping. I don't think you can see me, but just waving my hands wildly. That's great. So I like that you start with the subject, the wild eyes, and immediately make it sensual, like the taste of blood in your mouth. The spare parts image is fantastic. The endlessness of waves instead of speaking is great too. Like what you're doing there is you're starting with the obvious like visual elements, and then immediately moving into the sensory, which is unique to you and your interpretation of the piece. And then you immediately make it about like legacy and family dynamics, and keep the cannibalism theme, like the way we from generation to generation cannibalize each other. And then also it's persona poem that ties into myth, where you're tying into other myths as well, like Sisyphus, and that's a really great use of that. That's a really great use of that image. I'm impressed. I honestly, I mean, and I would do it, but I think that'd be one that I would have trouble starting with. I think my next challenge is going to be to hit it on the Saturn, that Goya painting. That's fantastic. I saw a chat comment. Let's see. Persona poem. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. It has elements of you and of an alternate persona that's like myth based, which is fantastic. Anybody else have anything that you noticed that really stood out to you about the lines in that poem? I stepped on a lot of the critiquing because of our short amount of time that's left, but oh yeah, Aruni, your first poem today or your first poem ever? Oh, okay, right on.
Today.
Today, sweets. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Do you? How about it, Rooney? Do you want to share what you did for either the first or the second one to finish us off? I know I'm putting you on the spot. Yeah.
Okay, this is the first one because the second one I kind of went pear-shaped.
Yeah, sometimes I do that.
Caught mid-bite, his eyes bulge as the son's arm disappears up to a bloody elbow. The red of sinew is beautiful against the craze of tumbled gray hair. The father eats the head first, always head first, the son's last thoughts filling a vast emptiness. Are parents always on their knees when it inevitably comes to eating their young? The patella enormous and white, the milky thigh stretched. The strain of choking on a shoulder can only be relieved when the meal is done. He eats the pale body of the sun, the only way he knows how to let the light enter his dark.
Oh man, that's a good ending. Yeah, that's very solid, especially for 10 minutes of sense impression. That's very finished. The sinew, the patella, the thighs, that's all fantastic and so literalized out of the piece. And again, it's hitting on a similar theme to what Shema did, but taking a different angle on it, taking a very like direct description of it, but also hitting on that generational consumption. When parents sort of cannibalize their young for their own benefit. You vote against taxes for the future. It's that enacted in politics. It's literalized in this painting here. I got a private question. Somebody said they don't know what a persona poem is. A persona poem is essentially when you take on the viewpoint of somebody that is other than you. You pretend to be that person. You take on that persona. So like Matt, to some extent, was taking on like a Don Quixote persona a little bit, tinge with his. And then we had like a Shema taking on a mythical persona with hers as well. She took on the perspective of a god, not just her own perspective. And so it's something we can do with these paintings, especially because always when we look at a piece of art, we're kind of engaging in, if we try and engage with what the artist was saying, that's a form of taking on a persona already, or trying to imagine their minds as they made this thing. And then sometimes we'll go into the persona of the audience as well. We're approaching the end here, but does anybody else want to share their piece or fragment of piece? Yeah, Matt, please do.
All right, let's see how this goes. I got Don Quixote, and I got the like you step into the painting.
Nice.
Guided by phantoms and defensive ghosts, honor bound by a fraternal order that never was, prepared to blood the dust, prepared for murder, I met Coyote by the side of the road. Harmless, misguided, suffering, sympathized, in need of understanding, cried the audience on the path, not targeted by his blade. When I was young, I learned to throw stones with a hidden hand. I learned to keep my pride while surviving the night, ruled by beasts like Coyote. I'm now grown, He is now old. In this hour upon this road, death has been decided before the first blow. I was not born to sympathize. I was not born to understand or catalog the why of Quixote. I was born in a burning house. I was born of fuel. Steady my hand, sharpen my blade, steel my will, so that I may take the head of Coyote, parade it down the road as a warning to beasts that roam the night and to all those who might sympathize.
Jeez, nice, man. Every third line of that hit so hard, I kept thinking it was the end. I was like, all right, yeah, the hidden hand, the coyote, the born in a burning house. I don't think I've ever even heard that before, and I don't know why, because that's a fantastic image. Weirdly, kind of hitting on some of the same themes as the Saturn poem, even though it's not related, but. You took your initial impressions of it, but you really run with like the themes of Quixote as a legend and the novel where somebody's fooling themselves and engaging with illusion. But then you talk about the really real need to defeat the deluded people that came before you. But damn, that ended up solid. Born in a burning house. Yeah, and the theme is sympathy too. Like point of the novel is to sympathize with him, and I would say the drawing too. But it's better not to because he's deluded, and your speaker is engaging with him has to cut his head off. Like you can't engage with the delusions, you get trapped in them. That's excellent. Yeah, really punchy lines in there. Like I kept thinking it was ending, then it wasn't. So nice, solid. Well. Let's see, it's 26. We got 4 minutes. We can't do anyone's poem justice, and I think that's a great time to end off on anyway. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Excellent work, and I hope you get some poems out of those. Feel free to keep the handout, use those exercises, and I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I'll hang around if anyone has questions. Sorry, John.
No. Thank you, Scott. And up next is Ishan Live, and she's going to talk to you about the long essay. So thanks so much, Scott. It's great.
For sure.